All right. Welcome back, everyone, to episode 7 of Practical Psychology Podcast. I'm going to be the host today. My name is Allison Koo, and I'm so excited to have our guest today, Lindy Fors. Lindy is a certified Canadian counselor and a registered professional counselor with the Associated Counseling Therapists of Alberta. And Lindy specializes in bullying and traumatizing events, virtual counseling, and workshops and psychosocial education to promote psychological safety in minor hockey. So I'm so excited to learn more about you, Lindy. Welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, Allison. It's really good to be here.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I would love to get started by just learning a little bit more about you and your journey because I see that you've been a certified teacher for over 20 years of experience in education and mental health. So, how did we go from your years of teaching to where you are today? And yeah, I'd just love to learn more about you.
Well, that's actually a really good place to start because the bulk of my work has been in schools, whether it's teaching or counseling. And we're experienced in the schools when it comes to bullying. It's a constant
Mhm.
issue. And we have a lot of programming that happens. There's programs like WITS, which is walk away, ignore, talk to someone, seek help. There's Pink Shirt Day, as we all know. And there's a lot of strategies that we use in school in order to promote kindness and positivity and things like that. And where my journey really began with puck off to bullying was when my son had a very negative experience when he was 9, one hockey season. And it caused me to do a really deep dive into not only the policies and the governance when it comes to minor hockey, but also how are we approaching bullying with our youth and our parents. We often have those big 1 day initiatives, or maybe even initiative. When I did my research for hockey in particular, there might be a year focus. There's definitely policies and procedures, but it's not providing a realistic approach to our when it comes to psychological safety with our kids and the players and youth sports in general. So I did a really deep dive when it came to policies. I got on a hockey board. I took the coaching training. I went into respect in sports and did the leadership activity training. I was looking into sports psychology and my master's of counseling psychology, things like social psychology. It all sorts of sort of interconnects with how that looks in practice and in the therapeutic environment as well.
Wow. Okay. So you've been really in this world for a while and you have done a
Mhm.
deep dive into this. Um, I wonder if you could say more about psychological safety and how you would, I guess, conceptualize it. And is that different in the hockey world versus outside of it? Like, would just love to hear more about that.
Well, I think when we look at it, especially from the point of view of kids, is that feeling of safety and it being a developmentally appropriate. So one of the things I noted from my experience with my son was a lot of the strategies that I was using with him, ignore it, don't take it personally, let's look at something positive, be grateful that you're there and you have the opportunity, and even employability skills we can learn from it. By the end of the year, I was really grasping at ways to promote that feeling of safety for him and to also remediate the impacts that the bullying had. And
Mhm.
what I realized, especially from a teaching perspective or a school perspective, is a lot of the strategies and approaches that we have aren't necessarily developmentally appropriate. So he did not have the cognitive ability or connection to the neurological pathways to really validate himself and look at how that was internalized and all of those things that we see from a adult perspective. He didn't have the mechanisms in place to be able to really process it. And I started taking a look at what does that mean for the sports environment in general. And when we look at psychological safety, it connects to things like learning, working memory, trust, relationship, and all of those pieces are connect and are part of a recipe for success. Not only psychologically and safe and keeping kids safe, but also success in the sports environment as well.
Okay, okay. And okay, so I'm sort of painting this picture, and I'm not the most familiar with that sports environment, but I can imagine that you're mentioning like some of these strategies are not appropriate developmentally, and that kind of makes me think of like the overall system. So I can imagine there's like the kids, and then there's someone like yourself as a parent. Like, how do you think about all of that and how it works together with puck off to bullying?
That's a really, really good question because we have to look at it from a systems point of view. So even as a counselor, part of my role I see as an advocate. So looking at leadership and governance, and then the other piece is education. So whether it's our coaches, our parents, our board members, that psychosocial education is key. It's a very key piece. We needed to address some of the logical fallacies out there, the axioms that may or may not be beneficial for kids' safety. The minor hockey has done an excellent job when it comes to physical safety. There's a lot of explicit rules and procedures and strategies in place to make sure that kids are safe when they're physically injured. And I think what I'm promoting and what I think we need to promote is also that the mental health matters. It's just as important as as physical safety. When we think about all of the people involved in psychological safety in a sports environment, we have the parents, and oftentimes we focus on the kids and what's happening for them, how they're processing it, what's going on with their interpersonal relationships and those social groups, but we're often not taking a step back and looking at what do the parents need to be supported. And I can talk from my own experience. There's the parent guilt, there's the anxiety, there's the not knowing the hockey culture or the sports culture and some of the principles or the paradigms that are being said that you don't know exactly how valid they are or what approaches are to try and remediate what's going on. And sometimes the parents get lost in the mix and they aren't able to be that really important support to their kids.
Yeah, I can imagine. So, what does like a client session look like for you? Like if you're working, how does your approach differ as a counselor when you're working with a parent versus a child who's maybe experiencing bullying?
We need to really pull apart what's going on for the parent. So there's a lot of varying issues or reasons why they're feeling the way that they do. And ultimately it comes to that point of acceptance and what is in their locus of control. A lot of things are out of control, our control as a parent. So that may seem unfair, it may be unjust, it may be approaches that we don't agree with. So some of my work with parents is how do I approach people with a sense of emotional regulation so that I can enact some change and find some positive solutions in the situations that I'm facing. And of course, there's those personal issues as well. I'm not sure about the other sports arenas. I played an elite with an elite soccer team when I was a teenager, and we went to the national championships a couple years in a row. And I look back on my experience with that, and it was very much the old school way of coaching. And I think that the damage or the narratives that we carry from that are internalized. Sometimes our parents have those too. So pulling apart where are your core beliefs? What kind of expectations do you have? And also, how do I get to that point of acceptance? And allowing those moments for our kids to grow and learn and become resilient. And when is it appropriate to step in? And because the possible damage or what's happening is beyond what's acceptable or what's just normal in that sort of sports environment.
Okay, as you're explaining this, you're kind of painting this picture. I can only imagine how much anxiety that would cause to, re-examine your narratives. Like I'm thinking I think what I'm hearing, if I'm, and correct me if I'm misunderstanding, but there's your own narratives that you may have carried from when you were going through, when you were speaking about yourself, like when you were experiencing being on an elite soccer team. So there's that. And then there's also like trying to shield or like work through the new narratives, I guess, that your son would have been building as well. So there's also like there's the preconceived, or I guess there's the previous ones, and then there's the new ones, and I don't know. Just as you're explaining this, I see why you mentioned that a systems approach is so important and um, would be so difficult to examine and explore.
I think part of the issue that I've recognized is the idea. Part of the idea is that story and the narratives that are they're really positive. They're important. You know, Pink Shirt Day, stomp out bullying. We're going to stop bullying, but we have to take a step back and think realistically. There will always be bullying. So
Mm.
when we look at it from a leadership and governance point of view, all of a sudden it changes the narrative a little bit, and we really do need to look at those policies and look at the positions within the association that really do promote psychological safety and youth voice. So one of the key features of what's on the website and some of the promotions are around how do we get youth voice, we capitalize on youth voice in the association. And one of my recommendations is that we have loose youth liaisons. So we'd have a safe and trusted adult that meets only with the kids. Maybe it's just once a month, but it's that check in because the kids are seeing what's going on. They know what's going on before the adults do. And I also think what's really important and that's been missed is youth voice when it comes to solutions. So whether it's from the systems point of view or a one-to-one therapy session, having that the youth in front or even the parents finding their own solutions, that's part of what success means when we're looking at achieving some of the goals and how do I navigate these situations and how do I navigate this culture in general.
Okay, okay, that makes sense. So as you're helping your clients sort of find these things, what are some common strategies or approaches, like therapeutic approaches that you have found to be most helpful?
Well, especially from the school point of view, I've borrowed from it for this project is the idea of growth mindset. So, it's loosely based on cognitive behavior therapy. So, change your thoughts and you change your world would be the axiom. So, I've created a couple worksheets. So, one example would be recognizing your zombie thoughts. And we'd look at how are some of those thoughts eating away at my confidence and how can I change that? So some of it's that practice and reinforcement, the homework. It might be some kinesthetic things that we do for around mindfulness. When you look at the sports research, when it comes to being a successful athlete, mindfulness-based cognitive therapy or cognitive strategies really do work. And there's a lot of articles out there. There's a lot of people that promote growth mindset, and sometimes that's sufficient. It's very solution focused. It's over a brief time period, and that's sufficient. There are cases where the bullying may be or it's triggering. There might be some additional mental health issues that are accompanying that, maybe a neurodivergence. So it might be ADHD or autism, and then that's a different approach for processing it. And then looking at from the parent point of view, how do they become part of the solution and really become part of that voice of positivity and growth for their children.
Okay, so is there a particular group that you tend to work more with? Is it parents or children, or is it both?
It's both.
Okay. And do you also do like family counseling as well?
I haven't so far. It's something that I think would be really valuable because sometimes what's going on in the families, pulling that apart can just create a more balanced environment for the child in who's participating in the sports. But I don't think I think it's important not to complicate it too much with what the therapeutic goals are. So when it comes to the bullying for the child or what's happening with maltreatment within the association, really focus solutions with that. And then also making sure that that psychosocial education piece is prevalent so that coaches understand how to work with kids who have ADHD, for instance, or autism, or who may be bringing in some baggage that's connected to trauma, some aggression or anger issues. The coaches have a lot on their plate, and we have some amazing, amazing volunteers out there. And more often than not, it's the simplest solutions are just making amends, apologizing, recognizing where that the approaches or the strategies, the relationships with the kids need to be changed a little bit. The biggest impact that I've seen is being in a dressing room and the child is obviously in a lot of distress, and the coach going up to their player and saying, "I'm sorry that I said what I did in the way that I did. The reason is I was trying to motivate you, or I really do believe in you, and I think that you have an ability to really succeed or be more of a star on our team." And when they have that kind of self-reflective piece, it really is beneficial for the kids.
Oh, yeah, okay. I love that's a really great example. And is this the type of education that that your organization um focuses on as well? Like
That
working with
well,
the
we call
coaches?
well, that's part of if you go to the Puck Off to Bullying website, there's articles that connect both from to coaches, players, parents, and
Amazing.
associations. So
Okay.
and the dream of it is for it to really become a hub for that accessing that kind of information. And there's some checklists on there for associations. There's how do I we're developing youth liaison training right now. There's workshops that we can offer for whether it's associations or teams, and it can be anything from, you know, how do we promote youth voice? How do we promote relationship and safety within our teams? And ultimately, in the back of my mind, I can hear my dad, who was my coach and a very hard nosed, old fashioned type of coach, and he even though he was hard nosed, it was about the kids ultimately. And then when you look at what's the purpose of a sports team is to try and get to that win, right? But I think when we start having these conversations, we see that we also need to teach kids how to lose. When you look
Mhm.
at 10 teams, let's say you have 10 kids on each team and you have 100 kids, at the end of the season you're essentially saying there's 10 winners and 90 losers in our league, and we really need to learn to promote that idea of how do I lose, how do I have those coaches yelling at me or those criticisms and not internalize it. How do I flip it and use it in order to put that energy and that focus into my game?
Amazing. What are some of the common things that have helped you, I guess, teach how to lose? Like teach these kids how to lose.
Well, perspective, right? There's a
Mhm.
couple of articles on the website around logical fallacy, and I'm very much I'm a bit of a research geek, so I love diving into all different ways of understanding things. And I think that piece really does help give clarity and again, and really evidence-based solutions. So when I think about it, I think if we start to pull apart what the conclusion is and see that maybe the argument isn't that valid, that can really give us a place of narrative and dialogue that's more objective. And that's part of the solution is we have in a social environment in groups, there's so many differing biases and opinions and perspectives and baggage and triggers. How do we work successfully as a group, whether it's as a team or association or a family?
That's amazing. Thank you so much, Lindy. Your workshops, where can people are they in person, virtual? Like I'd love to share with our listeners a little more about the workshops in case they're wanting to look for having one offered near them.
It will really depend on the location, and virtually is probably the most common way of providing those workshops. And they're definitely geared to what the person or the association or the team really wants. And I'm really looking for collaborators, ways to bring in a lot of the great work that's already being done. I just saw a great podcast on the Anti-Fragile Academy. Changing the Game is another one that I follow. We have some local people in my town that do growth mindset and activate the winning within is one that I think of. So really promoting that is part of the challenge and when it comes to leadership. So I do have a puck off to bullying challenge hashtag, and it really is
Ooh.
just elevating those pieces of this journey in minor hockey that are really, really positive because there's so much out there. And so often we do focus on the negative. And that's really important in order to enact solutions and make sure that our kids are protected. But we also have to recognize there's a lot of really great work going on out there and celebrate that.
Okay, wonderful. Okay, well, the hashtag is puck off to bullying
Yeah, puck off to bullying challenge is what
challenge.
it is. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, we're on TikTok, Instagram, Facebook. So just really building that out. I only launched in April. I've been doing a lot of research over the last few years when our negative experience first happened, but the official launch was in April, and we're just hoping to build momentum. So I really
Okay.
appreciate this opportunity.
Yeah, congratulations. So, for anyone listening, the website is www.puckofftoBullying.com. And there's also a blog, I'm sure, with all the wonderful articles that you were talking about earlier. So it's www.puckofftoBullying.com//blog. Lindy, it was so wonderful to have you here today. Is there anything else that you wanted to add before we wrap up today?
I'll just end with our catchphrase, which is we may not be able to stop bullying, but we can tell it to get the puck out of here.
I love that. What a great way to end. Well, it was wonderful to speak with you. Thank you so much for your time. And I'm sure we would love to have you back on the podcast in a future date. But best of luck with Puck Off to Bullying and congrats again for launching in April.
Thanks, Allison. It's been great being here.
Okay, take care.